I know. Labour has done a lot of stuff, and oh my God, aren't you going to talk about what Labour are doing? Yes, 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 I am. We've already talked about David Lammy. Don't worry about it. We will talk about Labour. Don't worry. I'm not going to ignore them or anything like that. It's just, if you've been following my channel for a while, you know I have been talking about the Conservative Civil War for over 2 years. And honestly, it is going to get brutal. We are going to see some true blue on blue action and fighting and infighting. It is going to be wonderful to watch. And of course, interspersed all that, when we do it, we will be talking about, what's going on with Labour. I saw Rachel Reeves' speech yesterday, and I was sort of, disappointed by, well, not disappointed, but okay, I understood. You know, you know, we're not going to sort of, promise to build HS2 if we can't build it. You've had, I think it's Darren Jones come out and saying, he isn't ruling out building HS2. His, Rachel Reeves, pretty much junior minister at that point. So while, again, we're not getting the confirmation of HS2, don't get me wrong, I don't think it's dead yet. Because, as we've said before, there are many, many experts out there who have said time and time again, we've talked about, again, when we had the conversation with Gareth Dennis, who basically said, if you do not build HS2, transport in the north is going to remain screwed for years. And I am very much of the belief that not only once you've built HS2, that you then build HS3, which goes up into Scotland. You should build HS4, which goes off into like Cardiff, HS5, which sort of covers the south, like towards Bristol. So many much, high-speed rail infrastructure investments that we desperately need in this country really need to be done. And there are ways you could do it. How about, we issue railway shares or things like that, the public can buy, sort of get the public interested, in owning a piece of the railways. That was a massive piece of us building our original, rail infrastructure to begin with. Should we not maybe look at something like that? But maybe. Anyway, that's a talk for another time, because guess what? We're talking about Robert Jenrick. Yes. Robert Jenrick, as I alluded to just yesterday, has also written a piece to explain why we lost. And oh boy, oh boy. As I alluded to also yesterday, if you saw that video, gets pretty interesting as well. So before we go getting into this, please remember to click on the like, the share button, and of course down below there is the one-off donation link where you can again buy me coffee. There's the YouTube thank you button as well, and of course there is the Patreon page. There's the Pony Club down below as well. You can join if you want to support the channel like that. But of course, as always, you can always click the like and share button. And of course, let's crack on with today's video. So, Robert Jenrick writing in the Times. Why we lost? Because we got Brexit done, but nothing else. Again, I would say to Jenrick, okay, what exactly did you get on Brexit done? Because you were constantly banging on about the fact, and many people in your own party were banging on the fact, that Brexit still not done. But anyway, let's get into his reasons as to why the Conservatives suffered such a massive defeat. So it begins. We have suffered a crushing defeat. This was the Conservative Party's worst result for centuries. Not only did we lose almost all the red and blue walls, but vast swathes of our inner heartlands too. That was, I think, always really bound to happen. Even going back to the days, and I've said this many times, of Boris Johnson, he was balancing this coalition of red and blue wall voters, because if he did stuff for the red wall, the blue wall voters would abandon him. Did stuff for the blue wall, red wall voters would abandon him. So he was constantly walking on this tightrope, trying to balance both of these interests, and ultimately he failed. Liz Truss failed. Even Rishi Sunak failed again completely. Why? Certainly because of Liz Truss and even Rishi Sunak, they went even more on a hard right-wing direction, still following, as we've said multiple times, this ideology that they are just absolutely effused and fixed to, that regardless of whatever problems or anything that happens, it's not their ideology that is wrong or anything like that. Must be something else. So we'll find out what those other things are, I'm sure, from Robert Jenrick in a moment. So, among these casualties were, of course, the countless hardworking colleagues and now deeply motivated by public service who have now made their constituency and our country now a better place. Their personal records were very strong, but they were sunk by the Conservative Party brand. Do you also not think that that was a very serious problem for them? Even if they had such a good, you know, constituency record, that maybe people were fed up with them for other reasons as well. But and if you're saying the Conservative Party brand is so toxic, what do you do about it now? How do you untoxify that party brand? So he continues. What's more, it could have been worse. We narrowly avoided being wiped out altogether. It seems as if we were now granted a very stay of execution by millions of Conservatives deciding to hold their nose and vote Conservatives in the final few days of the campaign. Bear in mind, there is, I think we'll probably find out sooner or later here, whether the Conservatives whipping up the whole, oh my God, Labour's going to have a supermajority, Labour's going to have a supermajority. We'll see if that did any damage, or whether that had any, shall we say, success to actually bringing out those Conservative voters or making people vote Conservatives to, again, try and stop that, that's Conservative supermajority. Like I say, we'll find out when all the examinations of the votes and etc. are done, but we probably won't find out immediately. Maybe 2-3 months before we get, the deep investigative dives of what went on in this election. But he continues. Now there can be no moving forward, no recovery until we understand just how damaged our party is with the voters and why such damage has occurred. So it is time for us Conservative politicians to pause and properly consider what went so badly wrong. And now you have to ask, will he actually do any proper introspection? Will he actually look at the party, look at the problems that they had, and do anything like that? Once again, we have covered 5 different Conservatives writing very similar articles like this. None of that has really, really happened. They haven't even come close to actually doing that. So, in 2/3 of the seats that we lost, the Reform vote was now greater than the margin of the Conservative defeat. Critically, this happened everywhere, north and south. Many, myself included, only hung on because we were able to successfully subdue the threat from Reform. This is one of the big threats they now face, that the right-wing vote, as long as Reform is there, as long as they, keep on performing, sort of like this, the Reform vote is split. And here's the thing, we on the left have said for years that, the left-wing vote in this country is split between, 3 or 4 different parties. So it is incredibly hard to sort of win in the type of system that we are in. We are in a first past the post system. You may not like it, but hey, you've got to play the game. If you don't, you can end up losing. You can end up, as we've said, having split votes. You can end up with, if you remember the Uxbridge by-election, the candidate for Labour there losing by 400 votes. If the Lib Dems and Greens had gone and voted tactically, he would have won. He would have absolutely won. That would have been a massive blow to the Conservatives, because obviously that was Boris Johnson's former seat. So that would have been a very, very big blow to them. But, now tactical voting seems to have really got the message, especially at this election. And we'll see what we go from here. Labour are now in power. They've had, honestly, 72 hours in power so far. They seem to be doing quite a lot of good things and saying a lot of the good stuff. Now they actually have to start sort of legislating and sort of putting stuff forward. So we'll see how that sort of goes forward. They've talked about, again, just to mention Rachel Reeves, as we did at the start, taking on the NIMBYs. She's right. We are going to say House building has to happen. You cannot just constantly keep on saying no, no, and no. Otherwise, you just end up with no new houses. So we'll see what happens when they put these planning reforms forward. What exactly are they going to sort of put forward? So we'll see. So he continues. However, the leakage of our reform vote, while lethal, was not the whole story. If every reform voter had backed us, we would still be sitting at a much healthier 290 seats, but we still would not have won the election. Defections to Labour and the Lib Dems and to apathy cost as well. So this is the big problem you were seeing a lot of Conservatives talk about. We've seen this as happening as well. The three-way split. You've got losing voters to Reform, but you're also losing voters to Labour, the Lib Dems, and as he's pointing out, people not turning to vote. But that has been known for quite a while since the local general elections. The Conservatives worried about that missing 10% during the local elections. Where's all this missing 10%? Well, it's Conservative voters not turning out to vote for you because they cannot bring themselves to vote for you anymore. That is, once again, a serious problem. How do you bring them back? Because now you've either got to focus on reform, but as I've said before, chasing that reform vote, very, very small number of real, actual victories. And of course, this might also end up sending more people running to Labour and the Lib Dems, even costing more people to apathy. So there is a lot of stuff and a lot of problems they're going to have to really deal with. And how they answer this question is going to be incredibly crucial going forward. But that is whoever is the next leader is going to have to sort of try and solve as well. So why did people change their minds? Well, I can tell you, Robert, but I'm sure you've got your own answer for this. So let's see what he says. The real reason for this near existential result was not that we were too left-wing nor too right-wing. I love it. We were just too centrist for our own goods. Honestly, this is what we are seeing as well. Oh, we weren't too left-wing, nor we were too right-wing. We're just too centrist for our own good. So, okay, which direction are you going to go in then? There's a lot of people, including myself, would say you've gone very, very much right-wing. So this whole thing of, oh, we were just, too centrist for our own good. Don't think so. Doesn't wash, shall we say, Jerrick? Pardon me. Anyway, let's get on to this. Nor because we had this slogan, not that slogan. No, the fundamental reason we lost was because we failed to actually deliver what we promised for the British people. Really? So maybe you learnt your promise from the 2019 election of, over-promising and under-delivering, or, in the case of Brexit, where you massively over-promised what the huge benefits of Brexit would be, and then you weren't able to deliver them. So he starts with, we got Brexit done, but we must now collectively confront the very much hard truth that we failed to deliver the strong economy, the NHS, and secure borders that we promised. Again, you overpromised and underdelivered. Yeah, you got Brexit done, but there's still people in your own party that would say this is still a Beano Brexit. It's Brexit in name only. You're going to have Nigel Farage, waltzing about for the next 5 years in Parliament saying that this is a Beano only Brexit, that the Conservatives failed to get Brexit done, that they are the only party that can really do Brexit and, get it done properly. How are you going to fight against that? And as I've said before, in the Conservative Civil War, there will be a phase called the Farage phase where the Conservatives will have to really tackle that. Will they allow Farage back into the party? The massive can of worms that will open. If they don't do that, that will also be a big problem, because then how do you tackle Nigel Farage? They are honestly looking at such an existential crisis, and they can't answer these questions. They can't even answer these very simple questions. It's not even a simple question. They don't even have any answers to what these questions are. So anyway, he continues. Our biggest and most damaging failure was clearly migration. This was now the main issue which drove millions of 2019 Conservatives to reform, which cost us so many seats. I would also disagree that maybe not the main reason, but there you go. We'll see. Like I say, when we get the real deep dives as to why a lot of people went to reform. The Great Reform was, of course, leaving the EU, ending of freedom of movement, taking back control of the levers of migration. But the government then insulted the public with a decision that caused net migration to spiral to unprecedented levels. Even when the failure was so evident and the alarm bells ringing, corrective action was now painfully slow. It was because you couldn't actually take the decisions you needed to. You refused to think about this pragmatically. You want to, again, small boats. Easiest way to solve the small boats problem, just create a safe route. Just create a safe route. Have people being able to register on the French side. The French even said, do you want to do that? Do you want to set up a processing center on the French side? If you pay for it, we'll build it. But no, you ignored what was a very, very pragmatic solution. Wouldn't have solved maybe the numbers issue, but I'll tell you what, small boats would have almost dried up, though. Nigel Farage wouldn't have been able to, bang on about, small boats, small boats, small boats, because that would have dried up. But there you go. Anyway, we promised that we'd stop the boats, but despite progress last year, boat crossings are now at a record high. The government adopted a very strident language, but stopped short of the robust action actually required to deliver. In short, we let down the millions of voters who are now rightly concerned about this. Yeah, concerned, but as we talk about a lot of the time, when you hear two people talk about migration, they're really complaining about a bunch of other stuff, and then they're blaming migration on things that are like affecting the NHS, housing, etc. And why are they believing that? Because they're believing the populism of Nigel Farage offering a very simple solution to what is a very complex problem, especially when it comes to solving the housing crisis, looking at the NHS. Do they want to do that themselves? No, they were the Conservatives themselves fell into looking for very easy solutions to try and fix this. The short-termism in the Conservative Party was in itself a massive problem that they need to also admit that was a severe problem when they were in government. Is anyone so far acknowledging that of any of these like look backs that we've done? No, absolutely not. So he continues, migration was not our only failure. We lost confidence of the British public, arguably, to manage the economy. Yes, we were hit by some external shocks, such as the pandemic and the war in Ukraine, but we need to ask now tougher questions on our own mistakes. Okay, what were those mistakes? We abandoned fiscal responsibility in a mini budget that promised both lower taxes and huge spending, and working people suffered as a result. Okay, saying the mini budget was a problem. Good. That's actually, I think, so far the first Conservative we've actually seen blame the mini budget as part of the problem. You also have to look at the pandemic and the war in Ukraine. How did the Conservatives handle that? How did they handle the post, economic shock? Certainly for the pandemic, they didn't really do anything. They just continued on as normal. Again, the war in Ukraine. Also, certainly with the pandemic, really showed that having longer supply lines for your economy actually could be disrupted a lot more easier than short supply lines. Did they do anything about, securing shorter supply lines with our, biggest trading partner? No, they made it just even harder. But there you go. Anyway, we must now confront these hard economic questions. So, why has the growth in living standards proven very risible, but far from impressive? How did a party full of people who want lower taxes allow the tax burden and the government spending to rise to an all-time high? And then, what was that actual tax burden actually spent on? Is also another very interesting question. Where were, of course, the supply side reforms? I mean, where is all that deregulation? Um, like the planning system that would liberalize and energize our economy. Seems like Labour's already on with that, showing you how it's actually done. But we'll see what uh, their plans are when they come to it. And we must acknowledge our failure on the NHS too. Yes, the pandemic and strikes knocked the NHS, of course, but these factors did not explain the poor productivity that we oversaw. Over the last 5 years, we increased the amount of money nurses, doctors by at least a fifth, yet the amount of healthcare barely increased. So, again, problem you are acknowledging, but you aren't saying how you're going to do it, how you're going to sort of do that. But at least, Derek, some shockingly here, actually acknowledging that the Conservatives were responsible for some serious problems. Is he actually going to sort of seriously address those problems? So far, he's mentioning the problems, but he isn't really talking sort of about a solution or how you go about that yet. But I don't think the Conservatives maybe are at that stage yet. We'll probably see those maybe get fleshed out when we see some leadership contests. But make no mistake, I absolutely think this is Jerrick trying to sort of position himself for a run at leadership. I absolutely think Jerrick is going to be a potential leadership contest in these wars to come. This is why I wanted to cover this piece, particularly by Robert Jerrick. So back to this. Of course, that is not to say that we didn't have important achievements over the past 14 years. We did. We inherited a bankrupt country. Restored our public finances and welfare system. Ultimately, I'd say those have gotten worse under those 14 years. We unleashed a decade of good and full employment. There a lot of, shall we say, disagreements with the full employment on that. Remember, over those 14 years, the Conservatives said that they were going to deal with zero-hour contracts. They did not. Because of education reforms we undertook, our children are now the most numerate and literate in the Western world. That may be the case, but what about teachers? What about the environment that we are, getting these children to sort of learn these things and progress in these things? A lot of questions about that. So while that, again, of course, good, what does this mean for the actual education system as a whole? It's good that achieve those things, and I've said before, shockingly, if they do actually do that, then okay, congratulations. But what about teachers? What about all those things that we've really seen actively say things have gotten worse for them? So we took a major step to restoring our national sovereignty by delivering Brexit. And what effects has that had on the UK? He's not singing the praises of Brexit or anything like that. And of course, we led Europe's defense of Ukraine. Yes, and no to some extent. Boris Johnson going forward to Ukraine and bumbling about as he did actually have a lot of positive effects for providing the defense of Ukraine. So you've got to give credit where credit is due. Congratulations on that. But what about everything else? Two wrongs don't make a right. So over the coming months, we now must take time to perform a full and considered balancing act. We must now fiercely defend what we got right. That's going to be incredibly hard to do. You may remember we covered another Tory as well, saying, well, the public aren't going to want to listen to you. They're going to want you to go away. And you aren't going to be able to get the kind of airtime or anything like that that you used to be getting when you were in power. That is going to be, I think, one of the biggest shocks for the Conservative Party. So we'll see how their media relations sort of continue. And in the areas we failed, we must now be brutally honest, seek forgiveness, and begin the long, difficult road back to restoring trust. Again, brutally honest. be interesting when we start actually seeing you be brutally honest there. We must now firmly unite behind what is decided. It is not the time for score settling or any one faction to try and claim the mandate of heaven. uh, Oh, absolutely it is. I think it absolutely is. They are ready and they are already fighting. Technically, even Jerrick doing this is having a pop at the right wing by saying, Liz Truss and the economic mini budget fiasco. There's still many of his own fellow conservatives who said, you know, this is the type of thing we need to do. This is like a proper and true conservative budget. In fact, I don't know what actual Robert Jerrick's was opinion at the time of the mini budget. I'm sure someone could probably post it down. I wouldn't be surprised if he was incredibly positive, and then, like many Tories, once he saw the whole thing start to tank, suddenly maybe changed his tune. The public have now had enough and now want to see what we are as an effective and actually seriously opposition. We owe that to the country. Well, that ain't going to happen because, oh boy, they are going to try and claim the mandate of heaven. Roberts, you yourself are going to be probably heavily involved in trying to seize that particular mandate. And don't get me wrong, as we've said many times, all these factions that have formed in the Conservative Party are all out there, ready, waiting, and as we said, already started. Trust me, the blame game is just beginning. Just as we had yesterday, the Neil O'Brien's blame bagel. uh, Robert Jenrick here is pointing the finger at some sections of his own sort of Conservative Party. Even the fact that he says, "Oh yeah, we got Brexit done, but we didn't get the supply side reforms done." Is he effectively at that point maybe pointing the finger to Kemi Badenoch, who, when she quote had the opportunity by the Brexiteers saying, you've got to burn all these EU regulations, she turned around and said, I'm not going to be an arsonist. To which then they turn around and say, you will never be leader of the Conservative Party. Interesting how that's going to play out during a leadership contest, isn't it? But we'll see what happens. So, as always, let me know what you think to Robert Jerrick's excuses here. Definitely, I think so far, some of it, he was honest. Like, shockingly so far, he was honest about some of the stuff that they got wrong. Haven't seen too much about that. Everyone so far has really banged on about migration being the ultimate reason why they lost, and of course, UKIP. But Robert Jerrick does acknowledge that they had 14 years of power and they failed in a lot of areas. Now, of course, he doesn't really bring up why they failed in many of those areas. Like I say, if there is going to be a true, quote, balancing, as Robert Jerrick says there, then you've got to be brutally honest, Rob, about how you were wrong, what were the problems, why were these caused, and how you intend to go forward and fix them. So we'll see what happens. But make no mistake, Robert Jerrick, I think, will definitely be putting his hat into the ring of the Conservative leadership contest. That's why I really wanted to cover this, because it'll be interesting to see how his language and his rhetoric get shaped over the next couple of months, or shall we say next couple of weeks, maybe, as we do start to see the contenders start to position themselves for these leadership runs. So we'll see what Jerrick maybe changes over the next couple of weeks. Does he start to say, maybe there were problems with Brexit? Maybe he suddenly had no problem with Liz Truss's mini budget. Who knows? But we'll have to see. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.